Hi guys, how you doing? Before I start my video, which I will in about 10 seconds, just want to ask if you will subscribe if you haven't done already. I've done that the last couple of videos and I've got a few new subscribers out of it, so thank you for that, much appreciated. Plenty to come in terms of transfers from Eddie today, but please do subscribe, and here's today's update coming up. Cheers. Hi guys, how you all doing? Welcome to a lovely sunny Newcastle training ground this morning. Ignore the pitch in the background. I know it looks bad, that's currently getting reseeded ahead of the new season. I'm not really supposed to be showing that, but it's pretty difficult not to. How about if I turn it around like that? There we go. Yeah, we've been speaking to Eddie Howe this morning. In addition to the press conference that we had, I had a one-to-one with Eddie, and that will be shown tomorrow morning on Sky Sports News, an extended one-to-one. It'll be about 10 minutes with him, where I asked him some questions about the upcoming transfer window. So I can't really tell you too much so far, but stay tuned for that. There's some interesting comments from the Newcastle boss, and then also in the press conference today, there was a couple of really good lines out of it that just gives you an idea ahead of the new transfer window. And as you can probably tell by my headline of my piece today, my story, it looks good ahead of the new transfer window. So I'll get to that in a second, but just in the background there, over my shoulder, a couple of my colleagues, Rob Longworth and Dave Kane, just setting up this lunchtime for a one-to-one interview with Newcastle captain Bruno Guimaraes ahead of the Arsenal match, where I've got a range of topics to speak to him about. A full 10-minute interview will land on Sky Sports News on Sunday morning in the build-up to the Arsenal game. It'll also be on Sky Sports YouTube and across social media, so I'll put a link to it on the bottom of this once it's put together. But as you can imagine, there's loads to ask Bruno about. Even got a little corner flag up there, just hidden away. Got a corner flag up there because I'm going to try and get him to recreate his goal celebration from the win against Chelsea at the weekend, when of course he scored the second in that impressive 2-0 win to put Newcastle in a commanding position for Champions League next season. And look, it feels as though we're just about at the end of the season, doesn't it? It's been an absolute marathon. I was looking at Bruno there, he's played 52 matches for club and country this season. And it's been a marathon, hasn't it? I think because the cup final was back in mid-March, so much went into the cup final that it almost felt like, not that it was the end of the season, but you felt like it was something had been achieved, something tangible was there, and it felt like, right, that's us almost at the end of the season. But no, there was still 8, 9, 10 games to go, and we're now here with 2, and I don't know how you guys feel, but it feels like it's been an absolute marathon of a season. And look, what a season it will be if Newcastle can walk away from this with not just a trophy in the bag after a 70-year domestic wait, but also Champions League football to look forward to next season. Now, with Champions League football comes additional prize money, and comes the need, you would suggest, I think we all would understand that, for the club to be active in the summer transfer market and ensure that they're in a stronger place ahead of next season. So look, I think it's coming to that stage where Eddie's beginning to get asked questions about the transfer window. As I said, I asked him a couple in the one-to-one I did with him, but there was some interesting stuff that came out of his press conference as well, which I touched on earlier, and I'm going to read this quote out to you. This was in response to a question about Newcastle this summer and where they are in terms of being able to strengthen and PSR, and Eddie said, our ability to compete financially has of course been hampered by PSR, but these issues are not there for the coming window, so I don't see any reason why we cannot strengthen in the summer and not weaken. So really interesting there to hear Eddie say that he expects or hopes this summer to be a positive one. Look, he's kind of alluded to that already, but without saying in as many words, but just those key words there, why, I don't see any reason why we cannot strengthen this summer. Those PSR issues are not there anymore. Now, of course, we know they're not there because Newcastle have sold the likes of Anderson and Minte before the end of June last year, and then the smaller sales, the likes of Almiron and Lloyd Kelly, all adding up to help Newcastle in a stronger position. And of course, as we all know, they've not added for 3 transfer windows. So look, how much did Newcastle have to spend? We don't know. The club will never tell us that. I think I've said this before. My suggestion would be, I would be surprised if it's not round about the £100 million mark. Now, what does that get you? If it was Mark Gehey last summer, that would get you Mark Gehey plus a £35 million player. But you know, someone like Mark Gehey's going to be cheaper this summer, and you've also got to take into account that I'm saying, you know, I'm guessing around about £100 million. But that doesn't take into account if Newcastle sell. And now, while of course you guys don't want to sell any of your big players, the likes of Bruno, who I'm waiting to speak to, Sandro Tonali, Alexander Isak, of course you want to keep them all for an assault on the Champions League. And I think if you qualify for the Champions League, you keep all these players next season. I think the only danger of any of them going would be if you fail to qualify for the Champions League and the players aren't satisfied by what competition they're playing in next season, because of course they all want to be playing at the highest level in Europe. And it was interesting because Eddie was asked another question today about the geography of Newcastle and whether that makes it difficult to sign players and you know, attract certain players to the club. And the likes of Newcastle and Sunderland have had problems with that in the past. But Eddie said, look, the biggest issue isn't geography. He said the biggest issue in satisfying our players is the combination of ambition, which I allude to there, playing in the Champions League, winning trophies, and wages, is what he said. He said it's a big thing for players these days, and it's been an issue historically for us with our PSR constraints. So look, I think he's alluding to, you know, slight contract wrangles have had, problems getting people put up to a certain figure. You know, look at the Joe Linton deal, took quite a while to do. We've heard that Alexander Isak, of course, could be earning more elsewhere, and although any conversations have been shelved for now, you would suggest that Alexander Isak probably feels like he deserves more than what he's getting. He deserves to be the highest earner at the football club. So I think that's what Eddie's alluding to there. So yeah, he said it's a big thing for players. It's been an issue historically with our PSR constraints. We have to satisfy our players. He was then asked, look, does the club need to raise its salary cap to be able to pay these players more? And he said, look, we have to take it on an individual basis, but he doesn't see a reason as to why not, if the player was worth it, if the player was worth pushing the boat out for. So that just gives you a little insight into how Eddie's thinking ahead of the summer. It sounds as though that wages thing might still be an issue unless Newcastle decide to start paying more. But on the flip side of that, it sounds as though it's going to be an active transfer window for Newcastle if you manage to get the targets you're after. But you know, one of the questions I asked Eddie this morning in a one-to-one is, you look at Dean Howson from Bournemouth, you know, a player Newcastle have been mentioned with. There's definitely been an interest there. He's set to complete a deal at Real Madrid today for £50 million. They've matched his release clause. Bournemouth have accepted it. The transfer window's not opened. He's essentially signed a pre-contract deal with Real Madrid. And when you're competing with clubs like that, I mean, look, it's hard enough competing with your Liverpools and your Arsenals of the world, but to then try and compete with a Real Madrid or a Barcelona, it's pretty difficult. And as Eddie has said a number of times, the pool of players that he is interested in is very small. The better Newcastle get, the better standard of player you get, the harder it is to pick up top level players. And if Newcastle can't compete with your Real Madrids or with your Arsenals or with your Liverpool or with your Man Cities, Chelsea's in terms of wages, then you're going to have a problem, and that is the issue ahead of the summer. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how it pans out. Clearly the club are trying to be active, clearly they want to bring in players, clearly they can bring in players, and it'll just be interesting to see which ones they manage to land. So I'm sure time will tell. It feels like they need, and Eddie's used this word creative before, it feels like they need to be creative. They need to look for players that maybe not every single club is interested in. They need to think outside the box a little bit, because perhaps they can't pay the same wages as some of the other teams. But look, at least in this situation, the money's there to spend this summer. And in Eddie Howe's words, I don't see any reason why we cannot strengthen this summer and not weaken. So that should whet your guys' appetites ahead of the summer. It'd be nice to have a couple of weeks off before we start talking transfers, but no, here we are, we're talking about it now. And obviously that in part is because we're seeing players linked everywhere. We see the likes of Howson going to Real Madrid, and it makes you realise, oh hang on, clubs are going for it now. Newcastle need to kind of get their act together and get moving quickly. So interesting to hear what you guys think in terms of transfers. Please let me know below who you would fancy joining the club, and I'll speak to you on Sunday at Arsenal. Looking forward to a little trip down there. Beautiful weather over the weekend, and you know, Newcastle of course can qualify for the Champions League with a victory. I would suggest, looking at it, a draw would be a good result, but imagine you go down there and win. 4 wins out of 4 it would be against Arsenal this season. You've yet to concede a goal. It's incredible when you look at it. You've beaten Arsenal 3 times, you've beaten Chelsea twice, you've beaten Liverpool in the cup final, you've beaten Liverpool, you've beaten Man United twice, you've beaten Spurs twice. It's a brilliant run of results, and those are the sorts of results that players should be looking at and say, hang on, I want to join Newcastle because they are one of the top teams, and you've proved it all season long. So guys, leave your comments below in terms of transfers. Those comments from Eddie Howe, keen to hear what you guys have got to think on that, because that says to me that Eddie Howe, it's the first time he's actually come out and said, look, we're essentially expecting a big summer ahead. So yeah, it's exciting times ahead. I think just landing the players is going to be the most difficult aspect of all. Alright guys, speak soon. Cheers, take care.